Hello there. This is assessment number 2 for curriculum studies, reading and research. I'm going to be doing my biology part and geography part in this video. The first 2 articles are to do with biology, and the first one that I'd like to deal with is critical thinking is best taught outside the classroom. I believe that critical thinking is an important part of biology, and Ellen Weinstein talks about critical thinking between primary students and college students, and she explains that past research indicates that the difference between young adults and children is not the ability to retain facts or apply prior knowledge, but a quality called preparation for learning. This was found by researchers asking 5th graders and college students to apply a recovery plan for bald eagles. And startingly, they came up with very similar strategies, even though there should be a massive difference between 5th graders and college students. So Weinstein kind of thought that traditional education might have therefore failed to help students think about ecosystems and extinction. But after this, both groups were then asked to generate questions about important issues needed to create recovery plans. And in this task, the college students focused on critical issues, whereas the 5th graders just kind of tended to focus on more simple questions like, what do bald eagles eat? How big are their young? How much do they have to feed them? Whereas the college students asked much more critical thinking, like the interdependence between the bald eagle and its environment. And this was the difference that the researchers found in Weinstein's articles, was that college students had the ability to ask questions which are the cornerstone of critical thinking. They had actually, in fact, learned how to learn. Weinstein explains that this kind of learning is extremely important for any students in any education facility. And she also explains that informal learning environments such as museums and field trips are better for this because they tolerate failure better than schools. When kids are given assessments these days, it's still a lot of just straight yes or no kind of answering. There's no subjectivity to it. There's no chance for them to be wrong and explore the question and by asking more questions. It's just, no, sorry, you failed. So she thinks this is a much, much better way for students to learn. She explains that teachers might have problems with this because of time allocation. There's not enough time to allow students to pursue their questions. Some students are going to think faster than others as well. There's a lot of topics to cover in the curriculum, and often teachers just don't have the time to cover it all. It is, however, extremely important that students are able to develop this critical thinking, because our future society depends on them being able to make important decisions for our future. It's extremely, extremely important. Some strategies for teaching kids biology and helping them to think critically, like Weinstein's talking about, would be take them out on field trips, give them that opportunity to question more all the topics they're studying, and give them good questions to study. But we'll be talking about some other reflection techniques later. And the second article I looked at for biology was the impact of ICT in the classroom. This was an article by O'Hara and Pritchard, and they explained that ICT is incredibly important. It can enhance literacy development, impact language acquisition, provide greater access to information, support learning, motivate students, and enhance self-esteem. So although this might sound like English, it's really important that literacy is covered in all subjects as well. Biology almost has a language of its own, and if software can be used to help students gain a further understanding of that, then it's going to help them tremendously. So in this article, research was quoted as having used ICT to enhance students' information gathering and writing skills. And this study was conducted for 2 years, and statistically they made significant improvements. The recognition and use of elements such as main ideas, supporting details, and cause and effect relationships grew dramatically. Their writing was also more cohesive than the control group as well. Technology was also found to increase reading comprehension. This was done by using a range of digital tools to enhance reading comprehension and vocabulary development. The tools provided students with access to pronunciation, contextual information, and comprehension scaffolds. And it also helped with language acquisition. So the students were able to comprehend the language and produce or use words to communicate far more effectively and build sentences much more easily once they'd been using ICT. Studies have shown that students will learn better through multimedia presentations because they create stronger memory links than just text alone, such as the traditional overheads or just writing on the blackboard. So yeah, multimedia is going to help a lot in that way. Also, it enhances the authenticity by allowing students to have access to authentic materials like news and literature, scientific journals, and videos, and it puts the subjects into context and can make them more culturally relevant as well. This is important because Australia is such a diverse, multicultural nation, and we're seeing more and more immigrants coming into our schools, which is great because it's allowing our students to get a different perspective from someone else in the world and just broadening their horizons a bit. It can also provide meaningful and authentic communication opportunities, such as email, chat rooms, and other digital means. Studies were also quoted explaining that ICT can significantly improve scores on standardized testing and accommodate for varying learning styles as well. As well as all this, surprisingly it can enhance motivation and engagement of learners. This is because the article explained that ICT gives students a choice in their assignment, and it can help them see relevancy as well, which is really important for students. They can self-assess with teacher feedback as well. It's much easier for the teacher to give feedback. Also, ICT gives students the opportunity to research about something they're interested in. There's just that much more flexibility with the internet and other things, forums that students can use. Amazingly, this article also suggests that ICT can increase self-esteem, especially for at-risk students with low self-esteem and self-confidence. A study was conducted using 60 students. It was split into an intervention group and control group, and the intervention group was allowed access to computer programs, and the control group had no technology. Pre and post questionnaire was given to the students, and it determined that self-esteem and self-efficacy increased for the students that had access to ICT. This could have been because of handwriting. Some students just struggle with handwriting. It's quite difficult for them, so computers allow them to have the same handwriting as everyone else, and they can type just as fast as everyone else and get everything done because it's just that much easier. So ICT for biology are endless uses. Can be used to research practicals, different aspects of practicals as well, give the students background information. Endless amounts of research can be done. We can have access to any number of scientific journals that's going to help the students. We can even see exactly what scientists are doing all around the world just to make the subject that much more relevant for the student. It allows access for better access between the students and the teachers, emails, forums, websites, all kinds of things. Huge, endless numbers of things for ICT. Now we're going to move on to the second part, geography. So the first one I looked at was learning cycles and learning styles, and this was Kolb's experiential learning theory and its application in geography in higher education. This article was done by Healy and Jenkins, and it states that students learn in different ways, and they believe that Kolb's experiential learning should be implemented more in schools around the world. This was actually a study done in England, I believe, or an article done in England. And they explain that Kolb has a simple 4-stage model that is concrete experience, reflective observation, abstract conceptualization, and active experimentation, and they should follow each other in a cycle. And they likened it to a spiral because that, like any circle, it can just keep going around and around and around, and they said it should just keep spiraling so that the students keep reflecting, keep looking at new concepts, and experimenting. So the experiential learning affirms the importance of activities such as fieldwork and laboratory sessions. However, Healy and Jenkins explain that it is very important for students to be systematically taken around each stage of the cycle, so it needs to follow on each step after each step. Any experience that students are not prepared for or are not given enough time to reflect on, they're not going to be nearly as effective. So with this strategy, you need to be prepared. You need to have everything ready and ready to take the students around in those 4 steps so that they can fully experience that Kolb's model, and they can get the most out of it. So in their work, they used a field course, and what they did for this is stage 1. They did abstract conceptualization, so students were required to read about competing theories on the geography of post-industrial societies. So that was the first stage. Second stage was active experimentation. So in project groups, the students were planning questions to test these models, which defined interest groups and set up interviews for the opening days of the field course. And then stage 3, they had some concrete experience. So this was kind of field work, and they did some interviews with different people. Stage 4, they did their reflective observations. So they did structured discussions, journal writing, and it encouraged the students to reflect. Then they went back to abstract conceptualization, just like I was saying, it was a cycle. And they did a tentative statement about validity of models as applied to that location and interest group. Then stage 6, did active experimentation. So they planned more questions to further their tests and revise the models in subsequent interviews. And then they had some concrete experience. So then they did further interviews. So you can see the cycle is maintained and it keeps going in the same way, but it has to stop at probably abstract conceptualization or active experimentation. The last article I looked at for geography was looking at reflection in the classroom. This one was titled Developing Future Leaders, the Role of Reflection in the Classroom. This was done by Cynthia Roberts. And she suggested that reflection is really important for the classroom. She introduced the topic by establishing how important it was in the classroom, and she said it builds effective leaders for the future by helping them to think critically. So Roberts explained that reflection helps the process of critical thinking about by getting students to think about their behaviours, attitudes, and their values and beliefs. So Roberts included a number of strategies, including reflective journals for students to complete. It's a pretty standard one. Often students will need a bit of a guide there to help them. You can't just sit students down and be like, okay, I just want you to reflect, just write what happened. Maybe you could give them a few actual questions that's gonna get that thinking flowing. But it's important, and Roberts mentioned this, that those questions are still left open enough for individual freedom. So you can't ask questions that are too specific, because the student's not thinking and they're just kind of answering the questions. So it still has to be a little bit open-ended. But then as the student gets better at reflecting, which suggests it's a process, you can't just do this one-off, then they're going to need less of a guide. In the end, you'll just be able to give them a journal and they'll just be able to fill it out. So Roberts also explains that dialogue between students and the teacher is very important and can be a very good part of reflection. She also explains that when the goal is mutual for the students and the teacher, then learning every part of it just becomes that much better, and it contributes to the students' learning. Technology can also be used to help reflection, such as emails, websites, discussion boards, and chat rooms. I do a lot of this at Avondale already. It should be quite easy to start implementing at high schools. This is done by the instructor posting a specific question, having students respond. Roberts also explains some difficulties with reflection that can include the need for context. If the reflection isn't linked to the subject, then it will not result in learning. So it's really important that those links are established. As well, reflection can also lead to the topic becoming too emotional and sensitive. Yeah, especially if you're doing this in a group discussion, if you're having students reflecting on an experience, obviously everyone has their own opinions, and it could potentially lead to some difficult situations. Teachers just have to be aware of it and how to use that. As well, some teachers may find it hard to implement because a lot of the time it requires a bit more of a fluid approach. Like, you can't structure it because students aren't going to answer it the same way. So you need to be able to flow with it and kind of go down different avenues of reflection. So if teachers or lecturers are kind of used to a more structured approach, they've got all their questions planned out, they might have to work a little bit harder on their reflection questioning. But that's all. That's the 4 articles I looked at for biology and geography. This assessment wasn't too bad. It was a little bit challenging just finding some good articles. I was actually really happy with the reflection one that I found because it was really good. I actually did my PBR on it, and the other assessment that we're doing for curriculum studies, and I kind of wish I had have read it before I did that because it had so many good points. But that's alright, I've saved it and I'll be looking at it later for when I'm teaching. But I did actually really see the usefulness of this assignment because it just got me looking at different strategies that I can implement in the classroom, and as well it did get me to reflect a bit, just get me to start thinking about what I'm going to do when I get into the classroom, what strategies I can use, and how I'm going to implement them. Yeah, that was about it. Thank you very much.